lots of fun stuff about me. I have fun in life. Been a security engineer most of my life, worked at a lot of companies. So a little bit of Latin. The Jesuits taught me some Latin. And qui custodiet ipsos custodes, who watches the watchman? So, in IT, everything is done. You have auditors watching over you. So just a little intellectual snobbery there. But the problem that I'm going to discuss today is about IoT and wireless, specifically wireless. And the big secret about the Internet of Things, it's not things, it's really the Internet of the radios. All of these devices, very few are physically wired to something. They're all using RF to communicate, and it's much bigger than you realize. It's not just Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And feel free to jump in with questions at any point. Unfortunately, the people online are just going to have to email me a question. But radios. A Samsung S7 has 9 different radios. And most people only think, oh, it's got mobile service, LTE, maybe GSM. But it's got wireless power. It's got Bluetooth, Bluetooth low energy. Different protocols, different frequencies. It's got GSM, GPS, UMTS as well. And they're all different frequencies, and they're all different protocols. I mean, obviously, LTE is what we're using now, much more secure than 3G and 2G. More encryption, harder to track. The phone companies have worked really hard with LTE to make sure you can't be tracked by your cell phone. Because they don't want to turn you into a drone magnet. And also 5G is going to be microwave, so that's more protocols and more frequencies. But even a home automation hub, it's got 6 different radios in it for Zigbee and Z-Wave and Kida and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and Lutron. For Zigbee is for HVAC, Kida is for fire suppression, Lutron is for lighting, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and Z-Wave is very similar to Zigbee as well. Different protocols, though, and different frequencies. And covert wireless is everywhere today, in your data centers, in your calling centers. People have tablets, they have phones, they have Bluetooth, they have smartwatches, and even your tablet, your wireless keyboards, and mice, and most of them are very vulnerable. This cheap little LED light bulb, it's got Linux in it, and it's a very poorly patched version of Linux, and it's connected to a console that is probably on your LAN. So if you realize someone hacks into the light bulb, they can get into the console, they can get onto your LAN, and nobody patches these things. When was the last time you heard someone patching a light bulb? But enterprise security today, you've got all these, everyone's got this. You've got the gigabit, 100 megabytes coming out of your building, out of your data center, and you've got $500,000 of beautiful boxes from the big vendors out there. Intrusion detection, DLP, APT, next-gen firewall SIMs, plus a bunch of other devices. It's great. You're locking down that piece of wire. But the problem, you've also got gigs and gigs of data coming in and out of your building, out of your data center, out of your trading floors, out of your hospitals, out of your critical infrastructure, and nobody is looking at it. You've got company phones, you've got personal phones. People bring their own hotspots in. Rogue cell towers, like international cities like New York, every embassy has a rogue cell tower. Washington as well. And they just scoop up the phone calls. They'll put your call through on an internet, a voice over IP connection. But you don't, unless you look at the phone and it says Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, you won't notice it. Radio-ready infrastructure, I'll talk about that. GSM listening and surveillance devices, IoT, they're all in your buildings. Your refrigerator in the office cafe will probably have an IoT device, but none of these are being monitored. Are there any questions so far? So the average security person, when you think wireless, you think, oh, maybe Wi-Fi, maybe Bluetooth. And Cisco and Aruba do a really good job at those two protocols. They can detect them, they can secure them, but there's 99 other protocols. And there's a joke there. But nobody is monitoring those protocols. Nobody's looking at them, nobody's monitoring them. There are hundreds of these protocols. I can't go through all of these, and you'll get a copy of this deck, but these are all standard, different protocols for different industries. You know, Bluetooth, LoRa is for industrial, where a device will be buried in concrete for decades, so it has to really just ping every few years. So it's very efficient on battery life. But, and there's decked headphones, you know, in your calling centers. They can be vulnerable as well if they're not patched and updated to the most recent version. And of course, you've got the protocols on top, and you've got all these devices on the bottom, and they're all wireless, and they all use different protocols. Excuse me. And you know, in the past few years, I've been in and out of wireless, but also in security, and these are all cases that I've seen just dealing with customers. Bluetooth skimmers everywhere. I've seen them at ATMs. I've seen them in gas stations. I talked to a major retailer, and he says they're finding them every week in their stores. So, you know, you think that the point of sale people have got it locked down. They don't. They're finding these things all the time. I was at a major clothing retailer, and I was in their IT department, and I was talking to their, he wasn't a CISO, but he had that senior level, and he was just clueless about what was going on. I don't want to get too specific, you know, he's got a career, but out in the parking lot, I told my coworkers, they're being hacked and they don't know it. And they were. I lost my credit card. My mom lost her credit card from the breach. And he just, it was an RF hack. So hackers got into one of the retail stores, and they sat in the parking lot, and they had a bunch of radios in the car, and they hacked in through a wireless access point, and they got to the mainframe, and they got to the credit cards. And, you know, it was a big chain, but it was just one point, and they discovered it, and they got arrested because a cop saw these guys with radio antennas on their cars and two guys in laptops sitting in the car. That's the only reason they got hacked. The intrusion detection didn't pick it up. Nothing picked it up. Michael's Arts and Crafts. I remember going into Michael's the week after, and they had chained all their card readers immediately. What happened? A gang was going into Michael's, and they were distracting the cashier and swapping out the card reader and plugging in a real working one, but they put a little Bluetooth headphone in it to transmit chip and card data, card stripe data, and PIN codes. So they were getting ATM codes, and they were just cleaning out people's accounts. And they were doing the same thing. They had a laptop with a big antenna on it sitting in the parking lot. Yeah, Bluetooth transmitters and the fake readers. And I've heard stories of people using cell phones and drive-thrus, and you give them your credit card, and it looks like she's working. And she was taking a picture with her cell phone of credit cards in a big arched drive-through place. But what's also are these cheap burner phones. You can go and for $40, pay cash, you can get an anonymous cell phone, and nobody knows who you are. The anonymity of this can be truly terrifying. You can't be tracked if you pay cash. I mean, maybe the FCC and the FBI could go to this independent phone store and find, and look for your picture, but if you paid cash, how are they going to track you? Not if you go to a T-Mobile and a Verizon, a real store, but I've heard stories, you can buy a prepaid SIM card, and that's how you get around it, is the prepaid SIM card. Yes, sir?
It's actually easier to not be tracked, but cash is easier to track than it is if you bought a Visa prepaid card
Didn't even think about that. Yeah, if they say we're not taking cash, you have to use a credit card. Use a.
That's what I heard from a friend.
And I know government is not a big business in this town, but I've dealt with government agencies as well. The Border Patrol is absolutely obsessed because the cartels along the southern border are hiding cell phones in bundles of drugs. And they're turning them on, and then they're, once again, burner phones, but they're using the Go Find Me option to find these phones. So when, like, people who commute daily across the southern border, they just find out where they live, and they, with magnets, stick this bundle of drugs under their car, and then when they come to Texas or Arizona, you know, they find their office through the cell phone. And then they put a bundle of cash with the same thing, with a phone stuck in the middle of it, and then they find it in Mexico. These guys are, and so sometimes they used to try hiding it in the parts of the car, but the Customs and Border Patrol they've gotten really sophisticated. So they were, at my previous company, they were asking us, can you detect if someone's driving through and there's more than one cell phone? They also asked us if we could detect non-North American cell phones too, because they're worried about people from other parts of the world going to Mexico or Canada and crossing the border at night. When I wrote this deck, the president of Chile had his office bugged. It was a huge scandal. Some people were hiding cell phones and bugs. I've got some bugs up here. This is a bug. They hid it in his office, and it was a huge scandal. Foreign embassies are constantly under surveillance. And from what I've heard, every embassy has a fake cell tower in DC and here, and the consulates here in New York for the UN have a fake cell tower, and they're just sucking down as much information as they can. So the question is, what do you protect? What do you monitor? Obviously, your holy of holies, you start with your data centers. A lot of financial institutions I've worked for have specific rules about no mobile devices in the data center during trading hours. Hard to enforce. There are sensors. There are, you make everyone sign a policy saying you're not going to go into the trading floor or the data center during trading hours. Boardrooms, they typically, in a boardroom before an important meeting, they'll have a retired cop come in and do a bug sweep, a TSCM, technical surveillance countermeasure sweep. But that's only good as long as you keep the room guarded. Ingress and egress points are always good, a place to check. Yes, sir?
Is it possible if you want to secure an area, you could just jam all signals?
Would you like to go to jail?
I mean, like a data center.
Would you like to go to jail?
It's illegal even in like your private.
You cannot jam cellular communications.
Not in the US.
The client that was a prison that was trying to jam signals and got shut down by the FCC.
Yeah. I've talked to Canadian clients, and governments in Canada are allowed to jam. But prisons are a huge problem. They're using drones to drop cheap little burner cell phones into the prison yard. And I gave this same speech in Ottawa at Carleton University. And as I was landing here in Newark, I got multiple phone calls from Canadian prison officials. They're saying, they want me to work with them. It's a huge problem in prisons, but it's hard to detect a cell phone if it's turned off. And people know that you turn a cell phone off, and Apple phones actually do transmit a very weak signal when they're turned off, but Android phones and most burner phones don't. But employees and contractors, you take a jetpack or an access point, you could be streaming data, and there's no way you could check. You could tether with a USB cable your phone to your laptop and stream data that way. And if you do it with the USB cable, no one will see you doing it. You might have a log in your laptop, but it's an excellent way to exfiltrate data without having to deal with data loss protection or dealing with the firewall or getting logged on the LAN. And there's 9 different radios in here. You could use different protocols. Yes, sir?
This has one that has a Wi-Fi on it, then you can turn that into your access point next to the
Right. Yeah, you can do that too. Wi-Fi could be detected, so like Meraki and Aruba will detect that information. So there might be a log of that, but Bluetooth, you can Bluetooth, with Apple you can Bluetooth tether as well. But you can also just stick in the USB cable, and then it's not, the data's going through that USB cable and going out through LTE or GSM or CDMA. So you're not saying, by law, you're not allowed to listen to those conversations. So there's no device you can put in to monitor that conversation. On the what?
TSCMs or recording pens?
If somebody left a phone and it's turned on, a TSCM will see the energy. But it's just a spike on a graph. By law, and there's very strong encryption on cellular service. So you'll see the energy, but you won't know if it's data or a phone call or anything. And like I said, you're not allowed to transmit or block without a license.
I did that for, it took us 3 days to track down what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what they did, because law firms are always stacked with boxes,
Yeah.
it was screwed up underneath the lawyer's desk.
He took an access point and hid it in his office, or
No,
was this a bug?
no, it was an outside temp that did it.
So I was working at a major telecom, and one of my colleagues had an access point in her cube, and I'm like, why are you doing that? And she's like, I needed the extra Ethernet port. You know, and you would go to Best Buy, you'd get them for 20 bucks. She had 4 devices, she only had 3 Ethernet ports in her cube. And I'm like, well, somebody could hack into that. Did you change the password? No, what's the password? And my, and this is a big major telecom company, and she was doing that. I finally said, somebody can hack in. They can get the Pringles can or something. So she took the antennas off of it. And I told her so many times, you can't do that. And this was before, I got into radio security, but I knew that was a problem. But people do that all the time, or they bring in their own access points because they want to, go out in the parking lot, or they want to go smoke and do work, and they can't. The company Wi-Fi doesn't reach that far, so they'll do things like that, and they think it's okay. Well, it's okay. I'm using a password, and they don't realize how insecure that is. Like I said, lots of ingress and egress of data. Public areas that are in your building, like loading docks, perimeter areas. Like here in New York, Starbucks Wi-Fi everywhere. You probably can get one on your phone right here. And there's privacy and PII information. The typical security issues that you deal with on the internet, you got to deal with wireless too. Are there any questions? And I'm like, where do you guard? What do you guard? By whom? How do you even? Traditionally, we've addressed it with the perimeter Ethernet firewall, but it's only as strong as your weakest point. Once you're past that, there's zero visibility. The retailer story I told you, that was a Wi-Fi hack. They never caught it. I was stunned that they never caught that hack. And to this day, I have no idea why they didn't catch it. But they felt they were very safe. All they did was monitor their logs from the firewall. They said they were very tight on the rules on the firewall, and they were being robbed blind. But also is like, who is monitoring your airspace? There are wireless vulnerabilities. Insecure Wi-Fi, the access points, Bluetooth, mice and keyboards. This looks and works like a mouse, but it's got a GSM card in it, and it records every phone call. I mean, not every phone call, every voice conversation. And you can get it for 20 bucks on Amazon. It's, how do you monitor that? It's going out on cellular service. And unless you've got, it comes across when you plug it in. If you've got like a data loss protection or something, it's just going to look like a USB mouse on your PC. So any antivirus is not going to catch that. I was at RSA last year, and a major security company came to me and said, we know we have access points in our network, and we can't find them. And I would think, well, normally you would use, you know, a Nessus or a Qualys kind of scan and look for these access points. You know, if you're using Cisco or Aruba, you, like everything else, you know, look for D-Link, look for, you know, the $20 access points. And they're very specific, but he said, I told him this, and he's like, I can't find them. I've looked everywhere. I can see the activity. I can see the signatures. I can't match it to an IP address. I had, and I'll talk about this in a moment, I had a customer who was using Johnson controls for the HVAC, and they were hardwired. So the thermostat was hardwired in the room, in the data center, but they never turned off the Wi-Fi. The guy from the air conditioning company, the chillers, he was out in the parking lot doing his work. He didn't want to come through security and show his ID. And so he knew that this Wi-Fi was working. He had the password. And he just sat in his car, listened to satellite radio, and he did all the work out there, he wasn't breaking any rules. But just that access shouldn't be there.
Was that this Wi-Fi company had that he was using to, I guess, remote in?
He was using Wi-Fi. So a thermostat, nowadays everything has Wi-Fi built into it. But this data center, it was managing the chillers, it was in the data center, but it was on a perimeter wall. And he just sat in his car with his laptop and a big antenna on it, and he could reach it. So when I was at Bastille, we discovered vulnerabilities on devices, and Mousejack is a huge one. So it's not Mac, but Dell, Microsoft, Logitech, all the big mouse controllers were using these dongles and wireless mice. And it wasn't Bluetooth and it wasn't Wi-Fi. It was a proprietary protocol. It was very energy efficient, so battery life was great. And the data were encrypted between the keyboard or the mouse and the dongle. But the only problem was the dongle would accept unencrypted commands. So anyone nearby could take a crazy radio, one of these things, plug it into your laptop with the right piece of software, you open a command prompt on somebody else's, run a script, and you own them. You can still do it to the day. There are billions of these dongles and mice out there. And this is kind of neat. I've got this crazy radio and a cable, and there's this free app on Google Play called Mousejack, and it actually shows you the MAC addresses of all the vulnerable mice and keyboards. So it's a nice audit tool. It's free. You do need a crazy radio, PA, and you need an OTG cable so the power can be transmitted. But look at this. I'm running it here, and there's, holy crap, there's at least 12 of you using insecure keyboards in this room. And you can play with this afterwards, but it's pretty scary when you think about it because they're not secure. But if you're a Mac, if you're the big Mac daddy, the Mac wireless keyboards and mice have always been secure. Key sniffer is related to it. So, but that one can actually allow you to record all keystrokes on a wireless keyboard. And more threats are coming. Me and my colleagues have found multiple threats. Cable modems, cable boxes. The DOCSIS code. We announced at Black Hat this year that there were vulnerabilities that the industry DOCSIS shares code for cable boxes and cable modems, and there are some serious vulnerabilities there. LoRa SCADA devices are always showing up vulnerabilities. SCADA is very slow to patch. And we're seeing a lot of traffic that's not encrypted. But basically, the assumption now is all the RF protocols are vulnerable, and you should really just lock down stuff or turn it off. So the threats are quite huge, and I've got all these things you see up here. I've got in this cute little box. This is a USB charger. It looks like, an Apple charger, but you can put a SIM card in it, and it records phone calls. So you could bring it to a board meeting, say, oh, can I charge my phone, and leave the charger there, and it'll keep recording, and then it'll exfiltrate the voice and the sound through a phone connection. $20. $20 on Amazon. Such a deal. This is a pineapple, and this is a man in the middle, and I don't see it up there. These are about $40, $50, and it will pretend to be a wireless access point, and it'll grab your password and then forward the connection to the real access point and connect you, but now it's got your password and your credentials. So now it can pretend, or it can exfiltrate once again if it has an internet connection. They give these away like crazy at Black Hat, and once you program them, watch out. You can break the law and get in trouble. Video cameras. I've got a few here. This one looks like a USB battery charger. We've actually found. We were at a big American bank, and we were doing some TSCM, and they said we hit a camera, and we found it. It was hidden, it was a wireless video camera. You could hide it in a restroom. You could hide it above someone's desk and catch their passphrase. So this is the kind of stuff you have to be very actively concerned about. This is a real cheap bug. You turn it on, you turn this on, and you can hear conversations. I'll get some squelch. So, and the stuff is cheap. It's ridiculously cheap. You can get into the spy business for less than $50. And there's also software-defined radios like the Crazy Radio or the bigger ones that this one only does a few frequencies. You can get the big $500, $600 software-defined radio, and you can listen to satellites, you can listen to police scanners, anything unencrypted, and you can transmit. I mean, you'll get in trouble if you do the wrong things, and there's a hacker community out there, a maker community, working with the software-defined radios. These are showing up everywhere. Cisco's wireless Wi-Fi access points are probably going to have software-defined radios in the coming future, and it's a big concern for security folks. Let's see what else. Oh. This is great. This is the story I was talking about. This was a client of mine, and we saw here, the chiller control, and you can see it was showing up all the time, and you could see the insecure keyboards. So we determined the location. We overlaid it on a map, but here was the Wi-Fi for the chillers, and the guy was out in the parking lot doing all that crazy stuff. And he was showing up every week, tweaking the system. He was doing his job. He was just lazy, and he didn't know he was breaking policy. Some of my colleagues have done some cool stuff. They went down to Arecibo a couple of years ago, that big radio telescope in Puerto Rico, and they hacked a satellite. There was a satellite NASA had that was just tumbling. It was absolutely out of control. And they went to Arecibo, and this guy actually contacted the satellite. They couldn't stabilize it. It ran out of rocket fuel. So it's just tumbling out of control. But now, because of their research, NASA said, yeah, go ahead, knock yourself out. We can't do anything with it. Now you can, through Google, you can communicate with the satellite, and you can send a signal, and maybe you'll get it back, which is kind of neat. So these guys are like real rocket scientists. They're out of Georgia Tech. They're freaking brilliant. What else? But a rogue cell tower. They actually, I have one of these, and I don't dare turn it on because I break the law when I do it. But when I do, you can see China Telecom on my cell phone. It's a 2G cell tower, but the signal is so strong, it will overpower T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and force anyone in the area to use that cell tower. It just overwhelms all the others. Stingrays are similar to the pineapple. They do the same man in the middle. We're not allowed to play with them, but law enforcement uses them to intercept phone calls like in a neighborhood. Haven't had much experience with them, but you'll hear stingrays and you can't buy, I think you can buy them on Alibaba, but you can't buy them here in the States. But the rogue cell tower, somebody found one in a printer. It was in the extra printer slot where the second bay for paper was. I mean, they're that small. And, like I said, it just grabs everyone's cell phone call. And if it's got an internet connection, it'll forward the call through a VoIP account. If you've got a cheap VoIP service, it'll just forward that call for you, but it's not encrypting. It's listening to everything you do and transmit. So you're screwed. But it's only $5,000 once again. I've seen this on Alibaba. They're really cheap, and you just plug the antennas in here. Are there any questions so far? No?
Remember about four or 5 years ago, they were demonstrating at DEF CON.
Yeah.
All right. One security scientist, where he was able to hack into ACATS to.
What's that four-letter acronym?
Okay. I'm not too sure, but it's a system that's used by the airlines. Right?
Oh, yeah, the engines, and wow.
Yeah, and everything, and he was able to show, for example, where he was able to literally, see what the settings are.
Yep. The Malaysian Airlines that disappeared was broadcasting for hours after it went off the radar.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
The speaker was arrested immediately after his talk.
I hope so, because you could crash a plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did have a.
But that's DEF CON for you, man. That's just leave your phone at home at DEF CON.
He was arrested after that and everything, because I saw his talk. Everything was interesting.
Those guys scare, and I've worked with these guys, and Georgia Tech is like becoming an RF center of excellence down in Atlanta. So there's more to come in the RF world, that's for sure. Since people were asking, could I do this? I don't have a lot of good answers. I don't have solutions, so you just have to be vigilant. But what you cannot do, you cannot block a phone call. Do not try it, you'll go to jail. Movie theaters have tried it and have gotten into trouble because there was a doctor who couldn't be reached, and one of his patients was in the hospital. And because of the heavy encryption, you cannot distinguish the data from the voice in LTE or GSM or any of them, CDMA. You certainly cannot build your own cell tower. And you can't do any of this. I show this picture because I just heard about this the other day. In West Virginia, on the western edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains, is a radio quiet zone. And the Navy and other government agencies there's 1 or 2 towns that are absolutely radio quiet. No microwaves, no cell, no Wi-Fi. So I thought that was a cool picture. And they communicate, the Navy communicates with their submarines through the earth. And they need that ultra-low frequency. So nobody can, in this town, nobody can have a cell phone or Wi-Fi or even a microwave oven, which is kind of fun, although, the police can't use radios. How do you do anything? How do you make popcorn? I don't know. I guess you use Jiffy Pop. So, solutions, you could wrap everything in a Faraday cage, make it huge, big league. I have been to 3-letter agencies, and they have film, a yellowish film on the window, and very heavy curtains on the walls. It's obviously a giant Faraday cage. You don't have to wrap your data centers in copper. There are other ways to do it. There's wallpaper, and I'm writing a patent about using RF wallpaper. It looks like wallpaper. You put it on the wall, and it blocks for. Yeah, but you can buy. It looks like decorative wallpaper. So it's, if there's any designers in the room, knock yourself out. You could, you could do the countermeasures to TSCM every day, every hour, everywhere. Nobody can afford that. There's just not enough retired cops to do that. You could ban the stuff. You could ban cell phones, mice, keyboards, USB usage. I remember I remember dealing with financial auditors, and they would pour epoxy in the USB ports of their laptops, just so you couldn't exfiltrate the data at all. And that was, now they have data loss protection, but I'm sure there are ways around that as well. People have asked me about mobile sensors, which some of them are quite good. They can actually detect cell phones, the core antenna in the cell phone, so if you turn it off, it can detect that. I've been talking to prison agencies and stuff like that. They're trying to go for that. But phones get smuggled. They use drones to drop them into prisons. But if you power off as you enter, you may or may not, some of these sensors will only pick them up when they're turned on. So you need one that people find out a way to get past detection. I mean, if there's a quiet spot in the office that the cameras can't pick out, and the employees are going to find that spot. And, even if it's in the middle of a room, they'll find it. It's amazing how people are good at evading the rules. But what about, your parking lots? What about, anything like that? It's just, I said, it's right now, the solutions out there are not mature and they're not comprehensive. But there are some solutions, and obviously it's policy-based. So, have a strong IT and wireless policy. Include that in your policies. Make your employees sign that. I know most trading floors, financial floors, ban mobile devices. One of my customers actually has a security guard, and people leave their cell phones on his desk as you enter the decision desks or the trading floors. Yes? What about?
HARP, H-A-R-P.
I'm not familiar with that. HARP in Alaska. Could you explain what HARP in Alaska is? No? Okay.
It's a radio array that's used allegedly to heat the ionosphere to influence weather in different locations. Allegedly. Hypothetical.
Okay, moving along. I've worked with a client that absolutely banned. They had the coolest thing for their cell phones. They had, it was little lockers, and you would badge and a door would pop open, and you'd stick your cell phone in and close it, and then go onto the trading floor. And if you had to make a phone call, you came out and you badged with your HID access card, and the door would pop open again, and you run out, run to a quiet spot and make a phone call. They only allowed company-owned tablets on the trading floor and at the decision desks, and they used mobile device management to make sure you weren't doing anything untoward with those devices. So they were keeping a really tight control on those devices. Like I said, you could run a TSCM sweep, run a Kismet scan, which is great for looking for rogue access points. But that's a manual process, and you have to do it really often. A clean desk policy, I would include mice and chargers, anything like that on that. I would probably, like I said, if you're doing an audit, I would run a mouse jack scan in the area just to see if there are any unsecure mice or keyboards in the area. It's, like I said, you could put this together with an Android device for about $30. I would also turn, this is a policy in Microsoft or on whatever, but prevent ad hoc networks on your PCs so your laptops and your mobile devices don't become access points. Vulnerability scans, run Nessus, run Qualys, run Encircle to look for those rogue access points. You'll probably find them if you do the right scan. Yes?
If you have an unsecure mouse, how are they going to escalate privileges from there? Right? What are they going to get from there?
The unsecure mouse, nothing will happen with the mouse, it's the dongle. And using a crazy radio and running commands on your PC, you can take over you run a script and you take over their device. If you go to mousejack.com, you can actually see it in action. It's a very cool. Finally, the mouse and keyboard companies have finally gotten around to replacing that. I think it's Nordic Semiconductor that made the chip. But like I said, they made a compromise between security and battery life, and they lost. I would forbid, mobile device managers, so for company-owned phones, turn off tethering. If you've got mobile device management on your tablets or anything, just turn off tethering on those. Forbid jetpacks and tethering in the office. We would find them all the time. People would have a jetpack in their backpack or their purse, and they would connect their laptop on the bus or on the train, and they'd go into the office. They never disconnected. It was still running, and they were on the LAN. So it was an easy way to exfiltrate data.
Yeah, that's one thing you would like to disable via GPO.
Yeah, well, yeah. That would be a great way, great policy. It'd probably be a little complicated. So if they're connected to the LAN, then disconnect them from Wi-Fi or these specific. But that's a policy you'd have to go through, through your GPO security or endpoint security. Automation, there are some tools out there. They're just not mature enough. I can't. They're coming, and I think in 3 or 4 years we're going to have better products. Like I said, there's multiple protocols, but I would definitely ban any kind of radio frequency in your data center. There's no need for them to be in there whatsoever. I mean, sometimes you have a guy going in there and he's got a phone on, he needs to do something, but he should get permission before he does it. I think that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, Z-Wave versus Zigbee. Which one is more secure?
I think Z-Wave is a little, but don't hold me to it. They're a little different, and they're different, but so I'm not a Zigbee or Z-Wave expert. Both are used, and you'd have to do your own research to see which is more secure. Yes, sir.
Anything have you seen that device is being used in SCADA control?
I've had conversations with power plant operators, and if you bring a wireless device into a nuclear power plant, there's a risk that the nuclear power plant will scram, that the control rods will drop. Oh yeah.